Good morning, everybody. We've got a lesson today on the moon. So I've got a couple books that we'll be going through, and we will continue talking about the moon next week as well. So today's lesson is going to focus all on the phases of the moon, why it looks different at different times of the month. And then next week we'll look at how it's involved with eclipses. Both we'll talk about solar and lunar eclipses, and then also how the moon affects our tides. So we'll do that next week, but this today we'll just be focusing on the phases of the moon specifically. And we've got our reader here that if we were in the class, everybody would have a copy of this. But I also have this cool book called the Moon Book with some information that we'll be using for today and then next week as we continue talking about the moon. Okay, so starting off once again with phases of the moon, and I'll be presenting my screen, or not presenting my screen, but showing this on the document camera at times as we talk about the phases. Now remember that the moon does not actually give off light on its own, right? It's the sun that gives off light. The moon just reflects. Like Earth, the moon is lighted by the sun. And like Earth, the moon rotates. As the moon rotates, different parts face the sun at times. I can't really see a very strong light here. That kind of is going to show a little bit of reflection. Okay, so if there are, actually, let me get my globe again. So if this was the moon, there would be certain times in the moon's rotation that it is reflecting the sun's light and other times that it's in the shadow, basically. Now, at any time, the side of the moon facing the sun is lighted. The side of the moon turned away from the sun is dark. Now, the moon's shape seems to change according to us and our way of looking at the moon throughout the month. We call the different shapes that we see the phases of the moon. Now, the moon does not actually change shape. The phases of the moon happen because the moon revolves around Earth. Now, as the moon moves in its orbit, we see more or less of the side of the moon that is lighted by the sun. So where it's at in its orbit around us, okay, so the moon is a satellite, a natural satellite around Earth. So as it's going around the Earth, there are times that it is in direct sunlight and others that it's in the shadow. Now, the phases of the moon change in a repeating pattern. It always repeats over and over again. This pattern is called the lunar cycle. First, we have the new moon phase. And I'm going to go ahead and show my screen at this point. So first we have the new moon phase. The side of the moon that is lighted faces away from Earth, so we do not see the moon at all. It appears like it's just gone. Then the moon moves into its orbit. Okay, so over here, this is the new moon. It is totally dark. It's in the dark side, so it's not getting any light from the sun. So that's the new moon phase, and then we're going to move in a circle all the way around the Earth, right, as it rotates the Earth. So there's the new moon phase. Then the next phase is called waxing crescent. Each night we see more and more of the moon's lighted side. After the new moon, we start to see more and more light. We say the moon is waxing as it gets bigger, or we see more and more light. So waxing is when it's more and more light. After 2 weeks, we see the whole side of the moon that is lighted. This is the full moon phase, right over here. So after about 2 weeks from the new moon, we have a full moon. Then in the 2 weeks after a full moon, we see less and less over 2 weeks' time. We're seeing less and less light. We say the moon is waning when it becomes less and less light that we see. Finally, the cycle begins again with a new moon phase after this waning crescent. Okay, so each of these parts, we've got new moon, and we've got a little poem actually we're going to learn soon that tells us all of the phases. So there's new moon, waxing crescent. Crescent is when it's that little sliver, and waxing means it's getting more and more light. First quarter moon is when you see about half or so. Waxing gibbous, you're seeing more than half of that light. Then full moon, then waning gibbous, then third quarter. Those mark, 1/4 of the way through. And this is 3/4 of the way through. And then waning crescent. So these kind of mirror each other. The waxing and waning crescents look pretty similar. So one of the main ways to note whether it's waxing or waning crescent is just be paying attention throughout several nights to see if it's getting more light or if it's losing light. Okay, so those are the phases of the moon. And let's take a look at this cool moon book now. And actually, I'll just show it like this instead. Okay. So as the sun sets at the end of each day, the sky becomes darker and darker. On many clear nights, our moon shines brightly in the night sky. It says, our moon is the brightest and biggest light in our night sky. It outshines all the stars and planets, which appear as small points of light. Some planets have many moons. Earth has just one. And it says up here, a little review for us, that a star burns gases that give off heat and light. The sun is a star. Now, a planet reflects sunlight and revolves around the sun. Earth is one of those planets. We reflect its light. We don't give off that gas and light and heat to others. We are all just soaking it in and reflecting the sun's light. Now, our moon looks big and bright because it is so close to Earth compared to the faraway stars and planets. It is about 238,900 miles or 384,000 kilometers away. Okay? So why does it look bigger to us than planets would? Because it's closer, yeah. And that's the same reason that our sun, it looks like the biggest star around, even though it's smaller than a lot of the other stars in the galaxy and in our whole universe. But it's just closer to us. It's the closest star of all. That's why it seems biggest. Okay, now the moon makes no light of its own to shine. It is bright in the night sky because it reflects the sun's light. It's about 1/4 the size of Earth. It is made up of rock and dust. There is no air or sign of life. The moon is about 2,000 miles in diameter, it says, and about 6,800 miles around. Earth is about 8,000 miles, so about 4 times as big, and about 8,000 miles in diameter and about 25,000 miles around. Now, astronomers study the planets, their moons, and the stars. Most scientists and astronomers think our moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Some believe something collided with Earth that tossed out a cloud of rock and debris. As you can see here, that's one theory. While orbiting around Earth, the rock and debris came together and formed the moon. So that's one theory about how our moon started orbiting us, is that there was something that collided with us and then the rock and dust formed together and started to orbit. An orbit is the path of one object around another. So it can be planets around the sun, or it could be things orbiting us, like the moon or the International Space Satellite. International Space Station. And a satellite is the term for anything that orbits around another. Now, a few theories about it with some mythology connections. Now, in ancient times, people thought that the moon was a powerful god or goddess. The Romans called their moon goddess Diana. In Greece, the moon goddess was Selene, who rode through the sky in a silver chariot. Some American Indian tribes, which we're currently learning about, believed that the moon and sun were brother and sister gods. Okay, so those are some of the beliefs. Stories and legends were told about the shapes and shadows that show on the moon's surface. Some people said that the moon showed a man's face. The man in the moon, who was imprisoned there for stealing. Others told of moon demons living there. So we've got different stories about it. If you've heard the term man in the moon, it comes from people's belief that it looked like there was a man's face on the moon. Okay, this is just a little bit more review, similar to what we were just talking about. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite. So once again, the International Space Station is a satellite because it orbits Earth, but the moon is a natural satellite. It's not man-made. It's the rock and dust combined that orbits us. It takes about 1 month for the moon to travel around Earth, and this book says exactly 29 and a half days. So that's about a month, but exactly 29 and a half days. So it's not like at the beginning of each month on the 1st, it's always a new moon. It doesn't quite follow the same calendar, but almost. So here's sunlight coming in to the Earth, and there's the moon. It says a satellite is an object orbiting around another one. This is the sunlight coming in. It shows the phases of the moon that we were just talking about. The moon makes one complete rotation for each complete trip around Earth. Thus, the same side of the moon is always facing Earth. So it's always the same side of the moon that's facing Earth, but what we're seeing is different depending on how much sunlight it's receiving. The moon appears to change shape, but it doesn't. The different shapes we see are called phases of the moon. We're seeing different amounts of light reflected on the moon. How much light we see depends on the positions of Earth, moon, and sun. So it has to do with all three, Earth, moon, and sun, their placement. Okay, and a little extra on the new moon. During the new moon, the moon is almost directly between the sun and Earth, almost completely between them. The moon looks dark. We see no reflected light. Then for a crescent moon, it's either waxing or waning as it's starting to gain light or almost completely losing light. And then first quarter moon and third quarter moon are the ones that are about halfway filled. And then we've got the gibbous moon. So we've got waxing and waning gibbous that we'll be learning about. And then this one calls the third quarter moon a last quarter moon. All right, so let's go through these phases in a little poem. Called The Moon Cycle. And we are going to be learning this. It's going to be your next poem to do after Father William. We are slightly behind the other classes in doing it because of the days that I was out sick. So we've got 1 more week that we're going to keep doing Father William, and then we'll get to the moon cycle. This is an extra fun fact. It says people used to know the time of the month because they were like keeping track of days without a calendar by just following the moon cycle. So they got probably very close to our regular calendar days just by seeing what shape the moon was in. Okay, so here is our moon phases poem. It's called The Moon Cycle. And I'll present my screen for us to look at it. Once again, we will be learning this soon. You can go ahead and start learning it if you want to, a little ahead of what the rest of the class will do. Sorry, just a moment. Oh, there it is. Okay. The moon cycle. And we don't know, I don't have the name of the poet for this one. It's just an educational little poem, but we'll just say the moon cycle. Around the earth it will go. It reflects the sun, which makes it glow. It orbits Earth in 28 days, which is, I guess, a little debatable because another book says 29 and a half. But it orbits Earth in 28 days as it passes through each moon phase. Watch the moon, it will wax and wane. It never looks quite the same. Waxing moon is getting bright. Waning means it's losing light. There are 5 words to describe the shape of each moon phase, which total 8. New moon, I can't see at all. That's that one. Crescent moon looks very small. Quarter moon is halfway bright. Gibbous moon is mostly light. Full moon means 5 phases are done. Watch the moon as it reflects the sun. The moon cycle. So those are the phases of the moon. I will attach that poem if you want to print it off or write it in your science notebook, you can. If not, we'll be practicing it like we usually do for poems in the coming weeks. And once again, we're going to be talking more about the moon next week as it relates to eclipses and tides. And we'll also kind of be reviewing the space race and some of the ways that we have explored the moon before. And you have a few notes to take on this as well. I've got, let me double check. Yep, there's a printout. If you want to print it out, you can, of all the phases of the moon, or you can just draw it in your notes. So you can print it or draw it and take some notes on the moon phases. And I hope that you are enjoying science. I will talk to you all soon. Bye.